Albania's prime minister's ally, Driton Kola, and his loyal aide, Erion Leka, thought they were untouchable until junior lawmaker Arben Hoxha stepped in to change everything. Flares ignited, smoke filled the parliament, and what began as a routine day of politics exploded into chaos, exposing corruption, betrayal, and a nation on edge. The day began quietly in the heart of Albania's capital, with the morning sun casting a golden glow over the parliament building. Outside, streets were calm, and a few journalists wandered around, scanning for any unusual activity. Inside, the grand halls of the parliament were filled with the familiar buzz of politicians greeting each other, their footsteps echoing across marble floors. Security personnel checked passes and scanned bags, a routine that rarely raised suspicion. But beneath the seemingly ordinary start, a storm was quietly brewing. In the weeks leading up to this day, whispers had begun circulating through media channels and political circles. Rumors hinted that a high-ranking ally of the prime minister was under investigation for serious corruption. While the public barely understood the depth of these claims, those in the political sphere were tense. Staffers hurried through corridors, their faces tense, aware that any misstep could have consequences. The ally in question had maintained a powerful influence within Parliament, and even minor hints of wrongdoing could spark fierce controversy. As the morning meetings commenced, a strange undercurrent filled the room. Lawmakers exchanged cautious glances, some speaking in hushed tones, while aides discreetly typed on laptops and sent messages to contacts outside. The media cameras were stationed as usual, capturing speeches and legislative discussions. But even the reporters sensed that something extraordinary might be unfolding. Observers described a rare tension, a feeling that the normal rhythm of parliamentary work had shifted. Meanwhile, outside the building, citizens passed by unaware of the magnitude of the events set to unfold. Vendors prepared for a regular day, selling newspapers, coffee, and snacks, oblivious to the fact that the parliament, the symbol of the country's political stability, would soon erupt into chaos. The calm streets belied the storm inside. Security cameras recorded the usual comings and goings, but none of the footage would have predicted the dramatic incidents that were about to occur. Inside, the prime minister's ally arrived with his usual entourage. Known for his charisma and connections, he carried himself with confidence, unaware that law enforcement had already gathered sufficient evidence to bring him down. His reputation for influence and loyalty to the prime minister had shielded him for years, and most colleagues treated him with respect and caution. Yet, as he entered the chamber, there was an almost imperceptible shift in the air, a quiet anticipation that something unusual was about to break the carefully maintained order of the day. Security personnel and investigative officials had been preparing meticulously. Hidden in plain sight, cameras, undercover officers, and informants had gathered months of evidence, documenting financial transactions, secret meetings, and illicit deals. Every move was calculated to catch him unprepared, but even they knew the political sensitivity of making an arrest inside the parliament itself. A single misstep could trigger a scandal far larger than the corruption charges themselves. As the morning sun climbed higher, bathing the parliament in bright light, the stage was set. Every element, from the calm hallways to the tense lawmakers and the oblivious public outside, contributed to the brewing storm. What appeared to be an ordinary day of speeches, votes, and routine proceedings was, in reality, the calm before an unprecedented political upheaval. The first moments of this day would soon mark the beginning of a dramatic chain of events that would shock the nation and expose corruption at the highest levels, leaving no one untouched by the chaos that was about to unfold. For months, the investigation had been quietly unfolding in the shadows, far from the public eye. A team of specialized investigators had been meticulously gathering evidence against the prime minister's ally, aware that even the smallest mistake could compromise their work. Every move he made was being monitored. His office, his private meetings, and even casual conversations in the corridors of power were under surveillance. Hidden cameras recorded every gesture, while intercepted phone calls and emails revealed networks of bribes, fraudulent contracts, and offshore accounts designed to hide illicit wealth. Each piece of evidence built a damning case, yet investigators had to remain patient. They knew that acting too early could allow him to cover his tracks, destroy records, or even flee the country. The Allies' public image was carefully constructed. He appeared generous, influential, and loyal, a key figure in the Prime Minister's inner circle. He attended public ceremonies, posed for photographs with constituents, and delivered speeches filled with promises of progress and prosperity. Yet behind the polished exterior, a very different reality existed. Investigators had documented extravagant spending, secret property purchases, and a lifestyle that far exceeded his official income. Offshore accounts held funds that could not be explained through legal channels, while shell companies obscured the trail of illicit payments. Every detail painted a portrait of calculated corruption, a network of deception that had flourished for years under the guise of political legitimacy. In parallel, anonymous tips had started reaching investigators, each one adding a layer of urgency to the case. Some came from former colleagues disillusioned by the Allies' tactics, while others arrived from whistleblowers within government agencies who feared being complicit in corruption. These tips provided crucial leads, pointing toward hidden transactions and off-the-record meetings. Each revelation was carefully cross-checked, verified, and recorded, ensuring that when the time came, the case could withstand scrutiny in the public eye. The plan for the arrest was equally detailed. Authorities recognized the political sensitivity of apprehending such a high-profile figure within Parliament. They knew the event would be historic, potentially dangerous, and highly visible. Strategic positions were assigned to plainclothes officers, entrances were monitored, and contingency plans were prepared to manage any resistance or unexpected complications. Even the timing of the operation was calculated to maximize the chance of success while minimizing harm to bystanders and lawmakers. The investigators understood that the moment of execution would be chaotic, yet they had rehearsed every scenario to ensure that the ally could be restrained without escalating the situation beyond control. Despite the meticulous planning, a sense of tension lingered over the operation. Investigators were acutely aware that the Allies' network of aides and supporters could attempt to intervene, obstructing the process and potentially triggering a violent confrontation. The thought of a public spectacle inside the Parliament weighed heavily on the minds of those involved. They knew that once the arrest began, the nation would be watching, and the political fallout could be immediate and far-reaching. Every piece of the puzzle, from months of undercover surveillance to intercepted communications and financial records, converged toward this critical day. Investigators were ready, but the unpredictability of human behavior always loomed. They had prepared for resistance, for deception, and for the unexpected. The stage was set, and the moment of truth was approaching, signaling a confrontation that would not only expose corruption, but also test the very limits of power, loyalty, and justice within Albania's highest political halls. The tension that had quietly simmered throughout the morning finally erupted into chaos as the Parliament session began. Lawmakers were still settling into their seats, adjusting microphones, and reviewing documents when an unexpected and alarming sight appeared at the entrance. Flares, bright and menacing, suddenly ignited near the main doors, sending a thick plume of smoke curling into the grand hall. The room, previously filled with the soft hum of conversation, was instantly transformed into a scene of confusion and fear. Alarms blared throughout the building, echoing against marble walls and reverberating across the polished floors. The bright sunlight streaming through the tall windows clashed with the smoky haze, creating a surreal, almost cinematic spectacle. Panic spread like wildfire. Lawmakers scrambled to escape the smoke, some clambering over benches, while aides ushered them toward emergency exits. Security personnel rushed to the source of the flares, trying to contain the situation, but the unexpected display disrupted every plan. The Prime Minister's ally, whose arrest was already set in motion, attempted to use the chaos to his advantage, slipping between clusters of startled officials and aides who sought to shield him. Every step became a dangerous gamble. The smoke obscured vision, and the sharp flare of light made movement unpredictable. Outside the Parliament building, the commotion began spilling into public view. Journalists who had been stationed nearby immediately sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Cameras captured the first images of smoke billowing from the entrance, while bystanders paused, unsure whether this was a protest, an accident, or attack. Social media accounts lit up with blurry photos and frantic updates, and within minutes, the footage had gone viral. Citizens watched in shock as the symbol of their government descended into what appeared to be a scene of total disorder. Inside, the tension reached a boiling point. The flares had not only obscured vision, but had created a psychological edge. People were on high alert, unsure who was friend and who might be part of a resistance or protection detail. The Allies' aides were frantically trying to block access, moving with practiced precision, but lacking the numbers to prevent law enforcement from advancing. Security forces had to call for reinforcements, their radios crackling with urgent instructions as more personnel hurried into the chamber. The air was thick with smoke, fear, and a sense of inevitability, an understanding that what had been planned in secret was now colliding violently with the unpredictability of real-time chaos. Amid the confusion, documents, phones, and personal belongings scattered across the marble floors. The sound of chairs tipping over and papers fluttering created a surreal rhythm to the chaos, almost as if the Parliament itself was reacting to the threat. The ally realized that escape was no longer possible, yet he continued to resist, hoping to buy time or create a diversion. Investigators moved carefully but decisively, knowing that one misstep could lead to injuries or further escalation. Every maneuver had to balance authority with caution, ensuring the arrest could succeed without turning the event into a catastrophe. By the time the smoke began to dissipate, the Parliament had been transformed into a scene of near mayhem. Lawmakers were shaken, aides were exhausted, and security personnel were on high alert. The flares had not only created physical obstacles, but had set the stage for the confrontation to come, heightening tension and making the moment of arrest even more dramatic. What had started as a routine day of legislative business had become a spectacle of disorder, captured in vivid images that would haunt the public imagination and serve as the prelude to a confrontation that no one would forget. The arrest attempt quickly descended into physical chaos, turning the Parliament chamber into a battlefield of power, resistance, and desperation. The Prime Minister's ally, now cornered by law enforcement, refused to comply. His aides, loyal and trained to protect him at all costs, surged forward, creating a human barrier between him and the approaching officers. The situation escalated faster than anyone could anticipate, transforming a planned arrest into a full-blown confrontation. Chairs were overturned as security personnel pushed through, attempting to reach the ally while avoiding injury to the frantic lawmakers caught in the melee. Papers, folders, and electronic devices flew through the air, adding to the sense of disarray. Some aides tried to physically restrain the officers, pulling at uniforms and shouting warnings, while others attempted to shield the politician with their own bodies. A chamber, which only hours earlier had been a place of debate and legislation, had become a chaotic arena of struggle, each movement amplified by the echoing walls. The Allies' resistance was calculated, not haphazard. Every step, every shove, was meant to delay, to buy time, to allow some means of escape. He moved swiftly between rows of benches, using the commotion to obscure his movements and frustrate the authorities. Security forces were forced to adapt in real time, forming containment lines and carefully coordinating to avoid harming innocent lawmakers. The clash became a tense cat-and-mouse game, with neither side willing to yield, and the stakes growing higher with every passing second. Observers and aides captured parts of the struggle on phones, broadcasting scenes of the brawl to the world. The images that emerged were shocking. Suited politicians sprawled on the floor, flares still glowing in the background, and a haze of smoke drifting across the chamber. International media outlets immediately picked up the story, labeling the scene as unprecedented in modern Albanian politics. Citizens who had been following the scandal from afar now witnessed a dramatic, visceral display of resistance, fear, and confrontation in real time. Amid the struggle, the Allies' aides were increasingly desperate. They realized that reinforcements alone would not suffice to prevent the arrest. Some attempted to barricade doors or move heavy furniture to block officers, but each effort was countered by trained security teams determined to maintain order. The chamber, once a symbol of legislative authority and decorum, had been transformed into a chaotic stage where control was contested with every shove, every maneuver, and every strategic move. Despite the violence and panic, the authorities maintained a focused, methodical approach. Their training and preparation allowed them to anticipate moves and adjust tactics quickly, minimizing harm while steadily advancing toward their target. The Allies' resistance, no matter how aggressive, could not indefinitely delay the inevitable. Gradually, the net tightened. The combination of strategic planning, physical coordination, and relentless pressure began to overwhelm the ally and his aides. By the end of the confrontation, the Parliament chamber bore the visible scars of the struggle. Scattered documents, toppled furniture, and smoky air testified to the intensity of the brawl. The ally was restrained, but the impact of the event went beyond the immediate arrest. The dramatic confrontation had exposed the vulnerability of even the most powerful figures, revealing that no amount of influence could shield one from the consequences of corruption. The nation watched, captivated and horrified, as the violent climax of the scandal became a defining moment in Albania's political history, setting the stage for revelations that would shake the country to its core. Just when the chaos inside the parliament seemed unstoppable, an unexpected figure stepped forward, altering the course of the struggle entirely. A junior member of the Prime Minister's own party, previously overlooked and underestimated, made a decisive move that would shift the balance in favor of law enforcement. Unlike others in the chamber, this individual had been quietly observing the escalating confrontation, noting the positions of the Allies' aides, the flow of movement, and the vulnerabilities in their defensive formation. What appeared at first to be hesitation was, in reality, calculated patience, a deliberate waiting for the perfect moment to act. The junior lawmaker's intervention was subtle but critical. Moving with a mix of precision and courage, they intercepted a key aide attempting to shield the ally from arrest. This maneuver disrupted the carefully orchestrated defense, creating a gap through which authorities could advance. The allies' aides were caught off guard. Their strategy, which had held firm against initial attempts, now faltered in a moment of unexpected betrayal. The sudden shift stunned both sides, the Allies' faction, unprepared for internal opposition, and the authorities, surprised by the timing and effectiveness of the intervention. The significance of the moment extended beyond the immediate physical advantage. In a chamber where loyalty had been a shield for years, the betrayal exposed deep fractures within the political party itself. Other lawmakers, who had hesitated to act earlier, watched in astonishment as the junior member's decision paved the way for the Allies' restraint. The action carried immense risk. Siding with law enforcement against a powerful figure could have ended a political career or worse. Yet the courage to intervene underscored a broader disillusionment with systemic corruption, highlighting that even those closest to power could choose integrity over allegiance. As the ally was gradually restrained, the junior member continued to maneuver strategically. They blocked the movement of additional aides and diverted attention away from officers working to secure evidence. Their presence created a momentary calm in the center of the chaos, allowing investigators to regain control and methodically move toward completing the arrest. Each second of this intervention was critical. Without it, the ally might have escaped, or the confrontation could have escalated further into violence. The chamber, still filled with smoke and overturned furniture, seemed to pause, almost acknowledging the impact of a single individual acting decisively. The unexpected allies' actions did more than secure a tactical advantage. They symbolized a moral turning point. What had begun as a routine enforcement operation had evolved into a dramatic statement about accountability and courage. Observers outside the parliament, watching live feeds and footage later circulated on social media, were captivated not only by the chaos, but by the striking narrative of an overlooked figure challenging entrenched power. The moment became a turning point in public perception, reframing the narrative from one of mere corruption to a story of personal integrity standing against systemic wrongdoing. By the time the ally was fully restrained and the chamber regained relative order, the junior member's actions had permanently altered the trajectory of the scandal. The intervention had prevented potential escape, minimized further violence, and most importantly, revealed cracks in the political armor that had protected corruption for years. What began as a calculated, singular act of courage would later be remembered as the pivotal moment that allowed justice to take hold, demonstrating that even in the midst of chaos, one individual could change the course of history. Amid the lingering smoke and overturned benches, investigators moved carefully through the Parliament chamber, scanning for anything that could strengthen the case against the Prime Minister's ally. The chaos had created unexpected opportunities. In the confusion, a small, unassuming briefcase had been left behind in an empty office. At first glance, it appeared ordinary, easily overlooked among the scattered papers and personal belongings still strewn across the floor. But trained eyes quickly recognized its significance. The briefcase, hidden in plain sight, contained a treasure trove of evidence that would confirm months of suspicion and tip the balance of the investigation decisively. Inside, investigators found neatly organized documents, digital devices, and financial records that were far more damning than anyone had anticipated. Bank statements revealed the flow of illicit funds through offshore accounts, tracing transactions that linked the ally directly to fraudulent contracts and kickbacks from government projects. Detailed contracts, signed and sometimes falsified, exposed a network of deception carefully orchestrated over years. Each piece of paper, each spreadsheet, seemed to narrate the story of greed and manipulation, proving that the Allies' public persona of loyalty and competence had been a facade designed to conceal systemic corruption. The digital evidence was equally compelling. Laptops and encrypted drives held emails, chat logs, and transaction records that mapped a hidden web of accomplices. Messages between the ally and various associates detailed agreements, instructions, and arrangements that directly violated legal and ethical boundaries. Investigators carefully cataloged each file, ensuring that the chain of evidence would remain intact for eventual prosecution. The combination of physical and digital evidence left no room for doubt. The corruption was not isolated, but part of an extensive organized scheme. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the briefcase contained not only proof against the ally, but also implicating documents pointing toward other high-ranking officials. Letters, invoices, and financial reports suggested that multiple individuals within the government had benefited from or actively participated in these corrupt dealings. The revelation transformed the case from a single arrest into a scandal with national implications, threatening to destabilize the inner workings of Albania's political hierarchy. Investigators understood the gravity of what they had uncovered. This was not merely about punishing one corrupt figure, but exposing an entire system that had allowed abuse of power to thrive unchecked. The discovery also had immediate strategic implications. With the briefcase in hand, authorities could strengthen their position in court and the public eye, countering any attempts by the ally or his supporters to downplay or manipulate the narrative. The evidence was tangible, undeniable, and meticulously organized, ensuring that attempts to deny or obscure the truth would be nearly impossible. It was a turning point in the investigation, giving law enforcement both moral and legal authority to pursue further arrests and investigations with confidence. Outside the chamber, news of the discovery began to leak, sparking a wave of anticipation and intrigue. Citizens and media outlets speculated on the contents, and public attention intensified. The visual of investigators carefully extracting documents and devices from a simple briefcase became emblematic of the unraveling scandal. In the weeks to come, this single discovery would form the backbone of prosecutions, hearings, and reforms, marking a moment when the hidden truths of corruption, long protected by power and influence, were finally brought into the light. The footage of the parliament chaos spread like wildfire, capturing the nation's attention and igniting a wave of public outrage. Social media exploded with images and videos of flares, smoke, overturned furniture, and the dramatic arrest of the Prime Minister's ally. The scenes were shocking, not only because of the violence, but because they exposed the depth of corruption that had long been whispered about but never fully confirmed. Protests erupted across the capital and other major cities, drawing thousands of people into the streets. Citizens waved banners and placards demanding justice, transparency, and accountability. The slogans, though varied in wording, carried the same message: a rejection of corruption and a call for integrity in governance. The protests were largely peaceful, yet the sheer scale of public presence sent a clear signal to politicians. The citizens would no longer tolerate backroom deals and abuse of power. Traffic came to a standstill, shops temporarily closed, and the city pulsed with the energy of collective outrage. Meanwhile, journalists and international media outlets descended on Albania to cover the unfolding scandal. Reports highlighted the dramatic visuals of the parliament confrontation, the daring intervention of the junior ally, and the discovery of the hidden briefcase filled with evidence. Headlines framed the events as a historic moment, pointing to systemic corruption and the vulnerabilities within the political elite. The country's image on the global stage was suddenly under scrutiny, with analysts speculating about the potential fallout for the Prime Minister and his inner circle. The intensity of the coverage magnified the scandal's impact, ensuring that no detail would go unnoticed or unchallenged. Inside the government, the pressure was immense. Party leaders scrambled to contain the damage, holding emergency meetings, and issuing statements that attempted to downplay the incident while promising investigations and reforms. Yet every attempt to manage the narrative seemed insufficient. Citizens had already seen the raw footage, the evidence, and the confrontation unfold, and the demand for accountability could not be appeased by words alone. The Prime Minister faced difficult questions about loyalty, judgment, and oversight as the Allies' actions and the system that had protected him were scrutinized from every angle. Public outrage also created a ripple effect beyond the capital. Community leaders, civic organizations, and watchdog groups seized the moment to push for broader reforms in governance, transparency, and anti-corruption measures. Town halls and public forums became arenas for discussion, debate, and planning, with citizens actively demanding change. The scandal had transformed from a single arrest into a nationwide reckoning, challenging both the political establishment and the citizenry to reconsider their relationship with power and accountability. As days turned into weeks, the intensity of the protests, media coverage, and public scrutiny showed no signs of abating. The events in the parliament had shattered the illusion of untouchable authority and revealed a system that had enabled wrongdoing for years. Citizens, emboldened by what they had witnessed, continued to demand justice not only for the Prime Minister as ally, but for all those implicated in the corruption. The nation stood at a crossroads, facing a choice between silence and complicity or action and reform. The fallout of that traumatic day would continue to reverberate, shaping public discourse, political decisions, and the future of Albania's governance for years to come. In the weeks following the dramatic arrest, Albania's political landscape was transformed in ways few had anticipated. The Prime Minister's ally, once untouchable and feared within political circles, was now behind bars, his power diminished and reputation destroyed. The evidence uncovered during the chaos documents, digital files, and financial records had opened the door to further investigations, exposing a network of corruption that reached far beyond a single individual. The arrest acted as a catalyst, triggering a chain reaction that shook the government, the party, and public trust to their foundations. Several high-ranking officials, once considered untouchable, faced scrutiny and pressure to resign. Some stepped down voluntarily, seeking to distance themselves from the scandal, while others were formally investigated for their roles in facilitating or ignoring corrupt practices. Parliamentary committees convened with urgency, reviewing contracts, approvals, and transactions that had previously gone unquestioned. The brief case of evidence discovered amid the chaos became the cornerstone for multiple prosecutions, serving as a tangible symbol of the corruption that had long operated in secrecy. The Prime Minister, though publicly expressing support for the investigations, faced mounting criticism for his close association with the ally. Opposition parties seized the moment, calling for accountability at the highest levels and questioning the government's commitment to transparency. Citizens continued to protest and demand reforms, emboldened by the dramatic events that had revealed the fragility of political power and the vulnerability of those who had long acted above the law. Public trust, once eroded slowly over years, was now tested in a sudden and intense wave of scrutiny. Amid the turmoil, the junior member of the Prime Minister's party, who had intervened during the arrest, emerged as a figure of integrity. Their decisive actions in the parliament had not only ensured the ally's capture, but also symbolized a stand against systemic corruption. Media outlets highlighted their courage, framing the individual as an unexpected hero who had chosen principle over political convenience. Citizens praised the move, and discussions about accountability and ethical leadership gained momentum, reinforcing the notion that individuals could influence the course of history, even within entrenched systems of power. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive. The Prime Minister's ally faced a series of trials, each revealing more details about bribery, fraudulent contracts, and misuse of public funds. Sentences were handed down, and assets acquired through illicit means were seized, sending a strong message that corruption, regardless of rank or influence, carried consequences. Other implicated officials faced similar scrutiny, and some were forced to make restitution or resign from their positions. The scandal also prompted structural reforms within the government. Transparency measures were introduced, oversight committees were strengthened, and new protocols were established to prevent similar abuses of power in the future. The parliament, once a symbol of authority and secrecy, became a site of increased vigilance, where citizens, journalists, and watchdog groups maintained a closer eye on legislative activities. In the end, the events of that chaotic day reshaped Albania's political narrative. The arrest, once a dramatic spectacle, became a turning point, a moment when corruption was confronted, accountability enforced, and public trust partially restored. While challenges remained, the nation had witnessed the power of evidence, courage, and citizen engagement. The chaos, flares, and fights in Parliament were no longer merely images of disorder. They were the beginning of a broader movement toward transparency, reform, and the enduring lesson that no one, regardless of influence, is above the law.